Hi, I'm Tom Chapman with Peeq Pro. Some of you may not be aware of what Peeq does. Peeq was created by two doctors, Dr. Cheryl Chapman and Dr. Chris Wolf, about 5 years ago when they were struggling with dry eye and ocular surface disease and really trying to figure out how to get people to clean their eyelids. We built a device called the Peeq Wava. It's a system, and along the way we discovered that there was a strong demand for compliance protocols. We work with about 100 offices right now around the country, about 150 doctors. And what we do in these webinars, our goal is to come up with people who are best in class with regards to their practice and talk a little bit about what they do for our customers and for anybody else that's interested in the optometry world. So there will be a little bit of a conversation about Peeq and contact lenses and things of that nature. But for the most part, we tell people on the front end, this isn't about Peeq. This is about you just telling us how you practice. So with that, I'm going to do an introduction of Dr. Aaron Wolf. So I have kind of a funny story of how I came across Aaron Wolf. I and made fun of in my family. I have 6 children, and they all say I spend too much time on Twitter. But on my Twitter account, I follow a lot of startup folks, and there was a startup person who had keratoconus, and he specifically referenced Dr. Wolf as his doctor and went through the litany of things, said, I haven't been able to see in 20 years. And Dr. Wolf finally made it possible for me to enjoy the things that I do outside, et cetera, by getting me into scleral lenses. And I was amazed by this. I followed this guy for about 2 or 3 years on Twitter. And this is the first time he's ever talked about his eyes. And it's the only time he's ever talked about his eyes. And so I thought this was a good thing. Cheryl, my wife, mentioned Dr. Wolf, somebody that she's worked with the AAOMC, has done a lot of stuff, and that Aaron is one of the best people in the country when it comes to specialty contact lens. So I'm delighted to have Dr. Wolf with us today. And with that, Dr. Wolf, I was wondering if you could kind of do a better introduction than I did. You practice in Austin. You have a full range practice. How did you get started? Where did you come from? All those sorts of questions.
That's such a cool story about the Twitter thing. I got to connect with you later to figure out who this is. Yeah, so I grew up around here. So I'm a native Texan, grew up about an hour from where I practice. And as far as I graduated optometry school in 2009. And then, yeah, I kind of just want to be a little bit closer to home. I've always been in private practice, and I've always been doing specialty lenses. And most of how I got into it to start was I got fitted in OrthoK my second year of optometry school. Wow. And I didn't have like any crazy weird prescription, but at the time I was curious as to what gas perms would feel like, because we were kind of just starting labs with like gas perms with each other, and I knew that we might have some experience fitting gas perms on patients, and that was something I think a lot of us students were really kind of nervous about. Gas perms are just kind of I don't know what it is in optometry school, but it feels more complicated than what it really is at that stage. And so I kind of wanted to know what it felt like, and didn't really want to wear a daytime one, so I heard about this OrthoK, and so anyways I started doing that. And then, yeah, I got lucky, the very first lenses and the very first lenses they put on my eyes, like worked perfectly. And I woke up the next day and was seeing awesome. And it was just like, never looked back since then. So, yeah, for the rest of optometry school, I was doing that. And then that way, when I started practicing, I didn't have any real intention of particularly doing contact lenses. I actually had been more interested in more posterior segment stuff, because that was really what my internships were more focused on. And then the doctor that I started working with down here in Austin was a 1964 optometry school grad.
Wow.
So and he was kind of fixing about retire, wanting to kind of sell his practice, and so this was like perfect. Yeah, I'm a young grad, this is exactly what I want. He wanted to bring in some medical stuff into his office. I could do that. But once I started working, then I realized, man, I was really slow. I was only seeing like a handful of patients a day, really early on. It might maybe less than that. So long story short, this guy had spent his entire career just doing, hard lenses, gas perm lenses, OrthoK, and he was an early adopter to a lot of these specialty lenses, scleral lenses and hybrids and things like that. And this was late, late 2000s, basically. And so I more or less kind of started apprenticing with that guy because I had all this free time. So I would, work with him on like, this is back when we would actually do like manual manipulation, like modifications on the contact lenses and all this kind of cool stuff. So that's kind of how I got into it. And because I was already doing the OrthoK and that was kind of my gateway to these lenses, I would just start telling patients about it. And they would ask me like, well, what are you wearing? What soft lenses are you wearing? And I was like, well, I actually don't wear any soft lenses. And so right off the bat, I was just kind of able to get patients in OrthoK. And that was just because I was wearing it myself. And then with that opened up the other doors with, hybrid lenses and scleral lenses were really starting to gain popularity at that time. And again, because this guy, give him, all the credit, he had like way back in the late 2000s, several like scleral lens fitting sets. This is like when nobody's like doing this stuff back then. And I was able to kind of catch the beginning of that wave. And I basically rode that wave as it became more and more popular, more lens manufacturers were coming out with different products. And I was, getting a lot of experience and getting to know the reps. And basically it's just like a surfer or something riding this wave as it was like starting to crest. And then, kind of the rest is history. So it's been like that now for about 15 years. I've got 3 fellowships, one in scleral lenses, one in OrthoK, and then a general fellowship with the American Academy of Optometry. And we average about 200 scleral lens fits per year. We average about 60 to 70 OrthoK fits per year, new fits per year. So, we do a pretty good amount. There's certainly people that do more, but certainly people who do less. So we're doing pretty good.
Can I ask a couple questions there just to kind of go back a little bit? So first thing is, you were looking at rigid gas permeables in optometry school. So this is a thing that came up. Do you think, or do you know, if I went to optometry school today, am I still having that same sort of exposure to rigid gas permeables? Because I know, you're right in that age where things sort of shifted from, hard lenses to soft lenses. So you're kind of right in that transition. Do the students you see or other people that are new to the practice see as much RGPs early, in their process?
That's a great question. I think back then and also now, rigid gas permeable, like what I call corneal lenses. So, the more or less traditional corneal gas perm lenses, I refer to as corneal lenses to distinguish from scleral lenses, which are certainly gained tremendous popularity in the last decade or so. I think that they are probably still underexposed to those types of lenses. When I was in school, I think we were still underexposed at that time. Soft lenses were really, I guess, kind of the focus. It was basically if you had keratoconus, that was kind of the only time that you would see a rigid gas permeable lens. When I was in school, nobody was doing scleral lenses at our school. Maybe they were in other schools, but that just wasn't an option. None of the attending doctors were doing them, and there was no option in that regard. And then hybrids had just literally gotten FDA approved like the year before, so that was also not really done. So again, that's kind of what I was talking about, catching that wave after school, riding it then. So yeah, it was pretty well underexposed then. And then students, I think soon after, they started getting more interested in things like hybrid lenses or scleral lenses. And I think corneal lenses have just continued to kind of be a little bit of a mystery for a lot of practicing doctors even today.
So the second thing that occurred to me as you were talking, as you did kind of your introduction and talked about how you got into this is, so you talked about that wave and that evolution. You also talked about having scleral fitting sets. Have you bought equipment, and have you changed kind of your process over the last 15 years with regards to, as 200 people are walking in either with sclerals or 60 to 70 on myopia management, are you seeing like, oh yeah, I have to really stay up with this equipment, or I have to do these things differently? And then how did you make those decisions? Because that, again, one of the questions I get frequently from our doctors is, I just don't know if I should buy this piece of equipment.
I think that my approach is a little bit, I don't know if I'd say unique, but maybe more unorthodox, because so I have always kind of had a lot of scleral lens fit sets. At one point, it was kind of like a weird point of pride. I think I'd had up to 15 fit sets, and it was almost like, hey, if something new was coming out and people were kind of like excited about it, I would just buy it. Generally, they're not expensive, and you pay for them in like a patient. So it's like really no reason not to basically, invest them. And yeah, so I just kept getting more and more of them. By 2019, a few people were starting to talk about some imaging devices more so for designing lenses. And so that kind of sparked my interest there, but I was still doing really well with the diagnostic lenses. Specifically, we're talking about scleral lenses. And then in 2020, of course, as we remember, COVID happened. And then it was like, oh gosh, now what am I going to do with all these like diagnostic lenses? Do we want to be using communal lenses, even if we disinfect them? What now? We have to pay more attention to what the disinfection protocols are, and what maybe some people won't care. Maybe some people are going to think it's like a huge deal, and it just became a little bit of a nightmare. So the very first thing I did, one of the very first things I did as soon as we closed for COVID, is I basically reached out to purchase a what's called a profilometer. So basically, it's just a topographer, but captures the sclera as well as the cornea. And to date, that was one of the best decisions I made. So that was the end of diagnostic fitting for me. So at that point, we went 100% profilometry or impressions. I also got certified on ocular impressions around that time. And so at that point, we did 100% map-based virtual fitting or impression-based fitting. Never did any more diagnostic fitting. And then now I actually have two different profilometers. So I've got, I think it's okay to drop the names of them. There's not many of them out there, right? But so the eaglet is the first one we started with, and it's amazing. One shot capture, takes about 20 millimeters of scan. Basically will scan anything as long as there's tear film. And then I guess about a year and a half ago, I want to say, maybe I honestly can't remember, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I don't remember, but I got the Pinacam AXL Wave. So Pinacam makes a few different models, and they have models that you can do profilometry with as well, but it was like 5 kind of images stitched together. They had this AXL Wave that had launched, and I really was excited about it, but like it was, frankly, it was just more expensive than some of the other ones, and it took me a long time to kind of pull the trigger on like, okay, should I do this or not? Eventually, I incorporated the Pinacam AXL Wave, and that was also an equal just game changer, because I was already doing like so much pathology in my practice, but for any doctors that are kind of familiar with these devices, the Pinacam is really kind of like your gold standard for like keratoconus and I guess more complicated like disease management. But it also does the profilometry, and at that time, I don't know if it's still true, but at that time, I was the first doctor in the United States that had both the Pinacam AXL Wave and the eaglet in the same office. I believe that's still true now. And we run every patient on both. Every patient that gets, scleral lenses, we run them on both instruments. That has drastically changed everything from efficiency. The types of lenses we can work with are more sophisticated now. As far as obviously, like from a hygiene standpoint, it's helped a lot. I'm not like having to constantly disinfect like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 like diagnostic lenses from a kit. Like I just grab one for each eye and just check prescription, for over refraction purposes. But it's so much easier now. And then same thing, going back, you were talking briefly about, myopia management, orthokeratology. I've never done, I've always basically done topography-based contact lenses, but with, those same types of devices, I actually have 3 topographers, and we can circle back to that in a moment. But I've always designed my lenses virtually, and investing in those equipment allows you to use just better quality. Cheryl can attest to this. Just better quality softwares. You get better quality lenses. You can handle more complicated cases more confidently. It's just, it's worth investing in that. So on that note, I want to circle back to something, because I do think that that's going back to like something a little bit more unique, and having all those diagnostic fit sets and things like that, which um, I've always been a fan of accumulating equipment. So like a lot of people will maybe buy new equipment and sell the old one. I've kind of not done that. I've always kind of like bought new equipment and kept the old ones. So at one point I had 4 corneal topographers here, all working, all functional, all being utilized, because different topographers kind of had different features. Like one was just better at, imaging kids, or one was better at designing a lens, one was better for sclerals or whatever. And I kind of would just keep them and just find space for them. And yeah, it's maybe not, I don't know if it's financially, though, I guess the best way of doing it, but there's just strengths with certain instruments that you have. And, it's just nice. It's kind of like if you're a handyman and you like to do a lot of woodworking or whatever it is, you just, as soon as before you know it, your garage is just full of like, just full of woodworking equipment. And then you don't necessarily get rid of other tools. You just kind of accumulate more. And then if you ask somebody who's like, well, when do you ever do that? And it's like, well, you never know. I might need it someday. So that was kind of my approach. And I've been really happy with the investments I made as far as the imaging equipment. Now, I'm not afraid to name drop some of these because they're just such wonderful companies to work with and use. But we use the Medmont Meridia is really very much kind of a gold standard in corneal OrthoK and dry eye disease and imaging. We use that to image all of our fits, and just we run all of our patients through it just for regular, blepharitis examination, meibomian glands. We always look at it just to see what their pupil size are between infrared and white light. So we run about 8 to 10 photos on every patient, just whether just a routine eye exam or whatever they're coming in for. We run the Pinacam on everybody. That gets her axial length, that gets her, corneal tomography. It also has a total eye aberrometer, not just a corneal aberrometer, but a total eye aberrometer, refraction, all that stuff. So, and then the eaglet, we run it for our scleral lens cases, and it's really just kind of unparalleled as far as scleral lens fitting particularly. So, I would say that's kind of how we operate. Hey, come over here.
He is a guest. If you're wondering, if you're watching,
yeah,
he has a little puppy with him. So
yeah, we have an office dog. My dog's here pretty much every day. My dog's here every day, so he got himself something he's not supposed to have. Sorry, Tom.
No, you're totally good. I'm going to change gears a little bit, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about practice management.
Okay.
Is that okay? So you talked a little bit about apprenticing when you came into the industry. So step one, first question is, do you feel like if you're a 25-year-old recent grad of an optometry school that you probably need to find somebody to apprentice under, or can you learn sort of independently on your own? Like, so your path was to kind of do it with somebody kind of guiding you. And part of the reason I'm asking is we've had a number of doctors that have practiced with Cheryl through Incarnate Word who basically say, I don't know if I could have learned how to do any of this without having this externship. And my real question is an externship enough that you could go into private practice, or do you need a year or two?
Well, I mean,
5.
these are just my opinions, right? So
yeah, that's why I'm asking.
My opinion is no. I think an externship is enough to just get exposure and spark like interest. Like, so the apprenticeship was like total accidental. Like I'm telling you, I probably only saw in my entire optometry school maybe like 1 gas perm on the eye that was a patient.
Wow.
I'm not joking. Like one or two, and maybe I didn't see any. I'm telling you, basically none. So I didn't have any interest in it. Had I had exposure to it, and then I would have realized, man, this is actually really fun. Then this brings up almost a discussion about residencies and if they're worth it and all that. Absolutely. Like if you have already been exposed to something you're passionate about, whether it's like pediatrics or, dry eye or, whatever, like scleral lenses or something, then try to do residency if you can. But the majority of people, I feel like, maybe it's different now. This is, this has been a while since I was in school. Nobody did residencies. I think in my entire class, we had like 4 of our students like do residencies. It wasn't a thing at that time. So unless you happen to get lucky and got exposed to something that just triggered that interest, I only got lucky that this guy was just doing just nothing but these complicated lenses because nobody else in town wanted to do them, because everybody else in town had graduated in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, late 2000s or whatever, and they weren't doing that stuff. So as far as, an externship or apprenticeship or whatever you want to say, I don't think that you would do those things unless at some point you had gotten lucky and kind of got bit by that bug. And so you got to be in a clinic that's doing a lot of, let's say it's dry eye, for instance. You'd have to be in a clinic that does a lot of dry eye, and you see the effects that the improvement in life that you're providing people, for you to then be like, oh my gosh, like dry eye, I never really thought about it. It's so common, but yeah, it's so life-changing to do that, or, myopia management or whatever. But if you do get bit by that bug, then I do think you really need to more like immersion environment. I think you need a high volume environment, whether that's, we have doctors here locally that shadow. I have a doctor that's coming in 2 days from Mexico City to shadow me. I had a doctor who flew in last fall from the Netherlands to shadow me. We have patients that come in from out of state. We have 3 patients from South America that fly in, and 1 from Athens who came in. So like we have patients from all over that come to see me. And that in some ways it's just worth it to then see what like a full day of nothing but kind of complicated care and complicated lenses look like. So if you didn't have that exposure, not to say that you couldn't like do it on your own, you absolutely, you could, it would take a little bit longer, but I would wonder where the interest would even come from if you weren't exposed to it. The most doctors don't do these things because most doctors, it's not that they can't, it's just that they haven't been in that moment that they realized that was something that they wanted to do. They haven't been lucky enough.
Interesting. I have a question. I have 3 questions from Dr. Chapman. I'm only going to ask one of the 3 because we shifted to some of the business orientation. I'll come back if we have time to some of the more technical questions she's asking. She asked, does your office take vision care plans?
We only take one. Yeah, we take VSP. We don't take anything else. We only take the VSP because, well, they just changed some policies that look pretty bad, for us and our patients. But they had been a little bit more generous, especially contact lens benefits. So that's the only one that we take.
And then her follow-up question, she said, if so, without disclosing fees pricing, how does your office ensure that you are still profitable when fitting a custom lens on a patient with medically necessary contact lens benefit?
Well, the way that I do it, and this is partly because, of the way my interpretation of things are, and I watched a VSP webinar a while back, and this is what was kind of given the okay. I'm certainly not telling anybody how to do anything regarding billing, but I always describe specialty contact lenses like an IOL, like a cataract surgery IOL. Your insurance with cataract surgery, if you're not familiar, Tom, they will pay for like basically your base surgical fees, anesthesia, certain, some facility fees, and then they'll pay for like a basic implant. Now you can get a better quality implant. You can get a multifocal implant. You can get a toric or whatever, but you would pay the difference. So it's not to say that you're paying out of pocket. Your insurance is still covering it, but they're going to cover basically the basic implant because that's what your basic need is, and then you can basically upgrade if you feel like you want something a little bit more premium than that. So I treat the contact lens is the same. So your insurance, and let's say we're talking specifically scleral lenses, because that might be the most common in these situations. Yep. I will tell them, hey, they're going to cover your basic fee, and they're going to cover it for a certain period of time. And in VSP's case, it's 90 days. So that, you know, we got 90 days to do a lot of work, and that's usually a lot of time. But beyond that, we just got to know that we got to try to get within there. Or beyond that, we might have to build your medical plan. But they're going to cover a basic lens. Now, that's not to say that there aren't better lenses than basic lenses. I structure everything in 3 tiers, and we call it that. We in an email we send to patients, it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and I always call it good, better, best. Good is like your standard lens. It's like what most scleral lens manufacturers are. There's tons of them out. There's dozens of these standard lenses, and I call them that because they're like vehicle manufacturers. I can semi-customize it. I can order certain things that one company offers might be different in another company. So what I like in a Toyota, I might not be able to make them do that in a Chevy because it's just different companies. Okay, so semi-customizable. And then I tell them, okay, well, there's a better quality one. I call them freeform lenses. And those are lenses that are software-based lenses where the lens will more precisely align to the surface of the eye. And it's basically a direct match between the map of the eye and the lens, how it's cut from the lathe. Now, that's just an upgrade. Okay, it's kind of like in the cataract surgery analogy. You can get a laser to basically break up the cataract, which makes it maybe a little bit easier to take it out. It's not necessary. You can do it by hand, but the laser might be better. And you just pay that. If you're going to do it, then the surgeon just charges you. You pay more to do it that way. So it's like that with the freeform lens. You just pay a little bit of an upgrade fee. The maps that we take of their eyes, the maps are not necessary. I can do it through diagnostic fittings. I just don't. I tell patients straight up, but I just don't do it that way because we've just basically gone beyond that, progressed beyond that, in my opinion, in my practice. So we don't go backwards. But and we charge a fee for that. And we just tell them, hey, this is whether you want a standard lens, I can design your standard lens based on what the maps tell me, or I can design a nicer lens based on what the maps tell me. And I just feed the map essentially directly into a software that goes directly into the lathe. But you pay a fee, right? And then that's just your upgrade for a nicer quality service and products. And then we also offer impression lenses, which I just say, hey, that's kind of like the quote unquote best. It's like your 3rd tier, in which case it's all like your insurance isn't going to pay for it. Your VSP just those are more like prosthetic lenses, not like a standard lens or anything. So that's just if you want to pay out of pocket. But ultimately, they pay add-ons or upgrades for things that are not entirely necessary, right? So that's like your HydroPeg coating, which I highly recommend, but it's not necessary. So there's a fee for it. Toric optics, if they need toric optics, then that's an add-on. It's not necessary. They could always wear a pair of glasses with their astigmatism over their scleral lenses. Who wants to do that? But that's the same thing with like an implant, an IOL implant. You could always put a pair of glasses over top of your cataract surgery implant, but if the option is to get the astigmatism corrected within the IOL, then that sounds better for most people, but it costs more. So I very much keep the IOL analogy and the contact lens analogy like really hand in hand, and it generally makes sense for most people. But we kind of utilize both that way, and we collect, we bill appropriately, and then it makes it worth it.
So this is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. So one reason is, one of the things that Peeq does is we have an accessory box that runs alongside dry eye, etc. And we hear from doctors frequently, I don't really know how to talk to my patient about price or about, how I can sort of say, you should do this. Like you're at this level, this is your expectation, and like you need to do this. So I'm curious how you sort of decide, and I'm using this not to tell you what to say. I'm curious. So if that's not what you do, that feel free. You don't have to walk down this path. Somebody walks in and you're going through good, better, best, and you're like, you really, based on all of the information I have about you, need to be down here in the better or the best range, just because you're not going to be happy with the good. How do you do that? And then what percentage of your patients sort of end up in these categories?
Okay, that's a great question. So
It's a Dr. Chapman question, so it's
Yeah.
not really. It's not. I made it a lot windier than her.
No. That's a great question. I think ultimately what you're asking is like, hey, if there's these different options, how do I help navigate the patient through their choice? Well, I always tell them, and the email kind of outlines all their fees and everything. It's very in depth. It's got links and all sorts of stuff, hyperlinks, and they can dive into it. And they always call back and they're like, hey, I think I want the middle one. That sounds better, right? Well, then we always tell them, or I have my assistant tell them, is like, hey, you don't know what you want right now, and neither do I, because we don't have the maps yet. So reserve anything until we get the maps. Because if I know that they've got some crazy thing on their eye, like let's say they've got a bleb or like a tube shunt or something from some glaucoma surgery, well, I already know, hey, well, we're not going to mess around with somebody's glaucoma surgery. The last thing I want to do is like mess up some glaucoma surgeon's results on your eye and this cause some like havoc in your eye. So then it's like, okay, you don't have a choice. All right, you can scrap the other options. You're only doing the top one, or we just bypass it and do like a corneal, like gas perm lens. Okay, so I can immediately navigate that, but that's a very small percentage of people. The vast majority of people that doesn't apply to, in which case I say, hey, come back, we're going to get your maps. Okay, we have that as a separate visit. The first visit is really about consultation, examination, tell them, hey, about these types of lenses, their services, what their eye, how the severity, what I expect they might be able to achieve. And then we have them come back, and that's where we take the maps. And when we take the maps, I go over it with them and I say, okay, well, just by looking at your eye, there's no way, as good as I am, and as good as Dr. Chapman is, we're not good enough to just no pun intended, eyeball it and look at your eye and tell how much toricity or, asymmetry it is. This is impossible. So once the map is taken, then I can tell you, okay, well, I think you'd actually do fine in the bottom one. I know you wanted to do the middle one, but I'll just be honest with you. Like, it's probably not going to make any real difference. If you want to save a few $100 or whatever, just do the basic one. Like, you should do just fine with that. And then if there's some asymmetry or something that was like, I really think that we're going to struggle with that. I'm just telling you right now that I think we'll save a lot of time if we go to the middle one, and I'll navigate them through it. And I'll be honest, Tom, a lot of it happens to do with what type of optics we find that we're going to need. Because when we take the maps, after the maps, I put a pair of lenses on their eye just for refraction purposes. And then when I do the refraction, then I can find out, okay, well, do they need any additional astigmatism correction on the lens, what we call front surface toric optics. I also am a provider for custom HOA optics. So I'll show them like a little white dot on a black screen in my room and say, hey, when you look at that, does it look like you're getting a lot of smear and streak and halos? And, basically, is it bothersome or not really that bad? And if it's bothersome, I'll tell them, okay, well, there's optics for that, but we need the lenses to be super stable. We need it to not rotate. We need it to fit basically like a glove and have and there are people that don't, as Cheryl knows, there's people that don't have a lot of toricity in the white part of their eye. And so it can be more challenging to get it to stay exactly in the same spot without rotating. But if they're going to do really custom optics, then I'll tell them, we got to do everything we possibly can to get this lens to be as rotationally stable as possible because of the optics that you are wanting to do. So then I'll navigate them through the process once we have their maps. And then again, there are people who really don't need the top one, but I'll tell you, a lot of them, they just want the top one. Like, they just want the best. So even if it's like they'll pay more out of pocket, to them, it's just worth it. The other advantage when you have this kind of tier structure the way I have it, and in my opinion, of certain types that are better than others, it's overall faster for everybody. Okay. And if it's faster for them, that's in their best interest. If it's faster for me, that's in my best interest. It's overall everybody's best interest to get the best quality product as quick as possible. And in many cases, if that costs a little bit more, it's usually worth it for a lot of people.
That makes sense. So you mentioned a couple things there that I want to drill into. You talked about sending an email. So my assumption is somebody comes in and gets a comprehensive exam. You say, there's some stuff going on here. We think we want to get you, fitted for some specialty lenses. You send an email essentially in between the two visits.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got basically 4 preset emails that gets sent out to people all day, every day. Typically at the end of every day, I just BCC several people onto each one. We have one email that's a myopia management email that goes out to kids, parents of kids. We got a second email that is specifically adult OrthoK. So it's only adult OrthoK because there's really kind of different goals and different stuff there. The third email is for corneal gas permeable lenses, and the fourth email is for scleral lenses. And the emails, they have everything again from, you know, links to videos and you know, websites and stuff that explains things more. It also have our fees, their expected fees, whether they're doing certain add-ons or not, if they're using VSP versus, you know, private pay versus, you know, medical insurance, and it's all broken down, you know, so it's easy for them to see. And then the other thing is that comes directly from my email address. I like that because and people generally do not abuse it, but like if they have a question and they reach out to me, they're reaching out directly to me. So I know that I can either give them the correct answer directly, or I can copy like my assistant who can get, you know, he can handle that one. I don't necessarily have to do all
Figure
of it.
out fees or
Yeah, what I don't like is back when we would have them come from like the main email address, and then the other staff maybe are not as comfortable answering certain questions. The last thing you want is to give somebody the wrong information. So, and then I also like it because if they ever need to get a hold of me later, I like that there is that direct line of communication. So, so yeah, that's how we basically handle, in a way, kind of our marketing in that way. Not necessarily marketing like external marketing, but marketing, internal marketing in that way.
So that is kind of what I was directionally asking. So that's helpful. So I come in and I get my fit. When do I come back and do my follow-up to say, yep, it's working? Is that 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 25 years?
Yeah. So the way we do things over here is because I'm busy. So it's I only see patients 4 days a week. I work Monday through Thursday. And then on Fridays are like my admin day. I'm here at the office, but we run a clinic schedule Monday through Friday. But Fridays are just basically our glaucoma workups, dry eye workups, and it's our trainings for our contact lens patients. And so it's things I don't necessarily directly need to be involved in. And so they come in, they get their maps, and I do impressions one Friday per month. We just do all of our impressions that one day per month. And then I order the lenses, and then the lenses come in, and I have them do their dispense and training with the staff. Because again, with the technology that Cheryl, Dr. Chapman is using and that I'm using, and you know, it's you can be very confident that lens is going to be very, very good. If it's not perfect, it's really darn close to it. If the prescription is not perfect, it's really darn close to it. So that lens can be dispensed and they can be trained on with the staff on a Friday, and then they'll just pre-book. And I say, if I do their maps, let's say on a Monday, I say, hey, go ahead and just book an appointment with me, you know, in about 3 weeks. 3-4 weeks, kind of depends. I tend to be booked out a little bit because I only work the 4 days a week. But so I say, hey, if an appointment comes up, just grab it. You don't want to wait till later because it's only gonna be worse. And so they'll pre-appoint, but then the lens will come in probably typically within a week or two. They get their trainings on a Friday, which are easy to accommodate those schedules pretty well. And then they'll wear them for a few days, a week, two, however the timing works out. And then they're already wearing them by the time that they come in for me to take a look at it.
All right, so I've come in, I've gotten fit, I've seen you for my 3-week follow-up. How much are you talking to them over the course of the time between now and I'm assuming it's like a 12-month visit is their next time? Or are they coming back in 3 or 6 months? What does that cycle look like?
So they're going to come back for follow-up already wearing the lenses, and then let's say that the lens
at 3 weeks looks good.
It looks great, and we finalize it. We're not doing anything fancy as far as specialized optics or whatever. I follow every 6 months for the first year. And again, if we're specifically talking scleral lenses, I follow them every 6 months for the first year. So you know, we'll finalize them. I'll see you in 6 months, and I'll see you another 6 months. Well, that second 6 months is a year from now. So that's basically going to serve as your eye exam. If you have like a regular doctor who's seeing you and this is a referral case, I encourage you to keep that appointment, you know, keep doing that, but also keep the one with me too. So you're almost going to have 2 exams, and that's okay. So, and then at that time, if everything's good, then it's more like once a year. Now, if it's OrthoK, it's a little bit different. So
I was going to transition to OrthoK here in a second. I want this is my like shameless Peeq thing. we find that the scleral patients are incredibly compliant. Meaning when they get a box in the office, they almost always reorder just because it's easy, it's simple, it's already pre-approved. But the OrthoK is a lot different. And so do you use a similar process? And then what do you do really on that compliance side on the back end? How do you get, because you're really selling like parents, but it's the kid who's the one that's putting the lenses in. How do you make sure that in that first 30-ish days, the habit is being formed? So that's really where I'm going, but you can go back to the beginning if you want to start with, hey, they come in, they're a good candidate, they have growth in their axial length, or they are already, high myope, fill in the blank of whatever your signals are. What does that process look like? And then in particular, I'm interested in the compliance on the back end. What do you do for that period of time after they've been fitted? And
yeah, to clarify, you're talking about lens care compliance?
Yeah, OrthoK lens care compliance.
Yeah. Okay, well, to try to take a bigger view, I guess, at that. So, we don't have these different tiers and stuff with OrthoK. Basically, it's just like you're just getting a software-based lens, because that's that's what you're getting with OrthoK. Yeah, it's like, why would I, especially for kids, like why would I do anything that wasn't the best? So and then essentially that's a little bit different, and this is really an interesting discussion to have, like as a panel, because everybody, I've had conversations at Vision by Design and stuff with other doctors, and basically everybody does it different when it comes to like a schedule. I like to look at the lens on the patient, even though I'm almost never going to change anything. I like to look at it on the lens to confirm, my fit, my base curve, and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of it is also going to be a little bit of a sense of like, how did that go? What is that motivation kind of looking like? How I guess intimidated, or how much of an emotional effect is this kind of having, like on the kid and with the parents, and it's kind of feeling it out. Now at that point, we're pretty much committed, but it's still, it's enlightening to me to kind of know if I expect to become a smooth process or maybe not. Okay. And how involved do we think the parents will be? At that point, we don't dispense the OrthoK lens. So I just put it on, I take all my data. We do it kind of like scleral lenses, where they come back on a Friday, and on a Friday they get trained for it. So I just put it on, we take our images, I take it off. It's probably been on half an hour, 45 minutes or so when it's all said and done. And that's the other reason I like to do it at the eval or at that visit, and I like to be involved, is then, as Dr. Chapman can attest, their vision is always a little bit better. If they were seeing 2400, now they're seeing like 2070 or something. If they were seeing 2200, now they're seeing like 2025 or whatever it is. Like, it's amazing sometimes how much vision improvement you can get in like half an hour. So I really use that to help drive the motivation, because like, okay, look how good you're seeing. And sometimes the kids are too young to totally appreciate that. They don't really care, but the parents care, and the parents see that, and now the parents are bought in. So it's important for me to be involved at that initial visit. And then the staff will see them at that second visit on a Friday, where they do the training. I also like to do that on Fridays, because it avoids an old issue that I used to deal with, where, okay, what do you do with those first few days of the transition period? Do you give them some daily disposables of like a -1, and if that's not working, a -2, and whatever? And it's like you're guessing what prescription they may need. And it's a little bit of, do you put the old glasses on and whatever? So as Dr. Chapman can attest, typically by like 3 nights, you're basically pretty well golden, like especially for kids. So if they come in, they do their trainings on Fridays, and they start that night, they got Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. They got 3 nights to wear before school starts on Monday. By 3 nights of wear, they're fine. They're fine. By Monday rolling around, they're fine. They don't need glasses. They don't need contact lenses. If it starts to wear off a little bit, they're not really going to notice. Okay. It's the same thing with adults too, right? So adults, you got Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night before you got to roll, go to work on Monday morning. It may not be perfect, but it's good enough, right? So I really like to time their trainings for Fridays specifically. And so I'm not involved in those. Now, the other thing that what we do, and I don't know if it's unique, but it's certainly the way that I like to do it. And then again, it goes back to the my schedule, and I just can't accommodate seeing these people that quickly. They have their 1-week follow-up with the staff. I don't see them. The staff will run their Pinacam, and with the Pinacam model that I have, it does retroillumination. With the retroillumination, I can see if they had any SPK, because it shows up nicely in the retroillumination image. And then obviously I see their maps, and we just take their acuities. So the staff can do all that. And if anything looks odd, they'll tell me. I don't hear anything about it. which means that basically if, no news is good news, right? But if anything looks odd about something they saw while doing the images, or the vision wasn't good, or whatever, then of course I'll look at everything and navigate that, troubleshoot it. So the 1 week visit, both the training visit and the 1 week visit are on Fridays, and I'm not involved with that. Then the next time I see the patient is after 1 month of wear. I like it because 1 month, because partly that's just as soon as I can basically accommodate their schedule. I can't really do it better than that. The other reason is I'm not really going to change anything less than that. Like, especially in more complicated cases or whatever, I've been burned so many times in the past as part of the overall learning curve over the many years of, OrthoK fitting, and that, okay, you do a 2 week visit. Oh, it doesn't look quite like I want it to. Maybe let me change this or that. Man, I've chased fits around in circles doing that kind of thing. And in the end, it's just not worth it. The vision will definitely be good enough. Everything will be fine. In 1 month, if something's off, well, that's a pretty long time. So if something's off in a month, it's basically, in my opinion, it's kind of like permanently off. So then I'm going to make a change. And then provided that everything is good, then I'll see them at 3 months, 6 months, and then 1 year. So, and if something's not good, every time I order a lens, I tell them, hey, I'm not going to see you before it's been a month. So if I do make a change at that 1 month visit, the next time I see them will basically be in what will turn out to be about 5 weeks later, because it takes about a week for a lens to arrive. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question on the scheduling.
It answered that question and like 4 more that I had. So this was really great answer. I have 2 questions left. I mean, I have 13 questions we could ask, but we have limited time. So I have 2 questions I want to ask. The first question I want to ask is, so family walks in, they're a very good candidate for OrthoK. How do you talk to the family? And if they express reluctance, do you push them down that path? Like, what are some of your tips and tricks? You talked about your tiers earlier with sclerals, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I thought that was really clever and a smart way to kind of walk people into the right place. It's a little bit trickier.
Hey, Tom, just to clarify, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 is kind of what we call it, but we also literally call it on the email or office vernacular. We actually use the words good, better, best.
Yep.
Good, better, best. Because sometimes there can be almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Somebody might feel like bad about picking tier 1. Okay. But tier 1 is good. So don't feel bad about picking tier 1, or don't feel like you're cheaping out or something like that. It's good. It's a good lens. I would never put you in a bad lens. But, there could be, better ones. But, so we, good, better, best. And sorry to interrupt that. I just
like
that distinction. How do I guess kind of get them into ortho?
So I walk in as a parent. I'm not an optometrist. I don't know anything about myopia management, etc. My kid is progressing fast. He or she is having a hard time seeing, etc. You go in there and you're like, geez, axial length has exploded over the last year, or, you're a -11 and he's a -3 and he's gone up, 2 steps. Like, what are the sorts of things that, how do you convey that information to a parent? Because it's like, one of the things that's different about a scleral and an OrthoK lens is you're talking about a kid where the parent obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but probably wants the kid to have the very best. But you're also talking about, now we're jumping in price from potentially something that was covered under, a vision care plan or something. And now we're talking, hey, this is a pretty expensive process. So do you have any tips or tricks?
I mean, kind of 2 ways. So I'll tell you kind of more how I did it for those many, many years. Like, I would say 13 years I was fitting OrthoK versus the last 2 years I've been fitting OrthoK. So for the first 13 years, I would do it based on the fact of like, okay, well, first of all, I'm an OrthoK. I think that helps a lot. These are computer glasses because I'm 41, but
I have driving glasses right here.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
That's like 2015, and so, but so I always kind of say, hey, you know what? I love it. I want you all to have the freedom from the glass and context that I've experienced, and all these kind of more personal kind of anecdotal type stuff. And then I'll go into a little bit of the science of like, okay, well, with OrthoK, it's more customizable. I can make your optic zone bigger or smaller. I can do certain things to get us a little bit more better treatment, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And usually that's, it was
Compelling.
more or less pretty effective, the other options aren't bad options, but also, for a long time, then we have all these other really good options, Now, in the last 2 years, everything has changed with the axle length, because now what we do is we've got these laminated copies. I stole this actually from Dr. Chapman, or I borrowed this idea and kind of finagled it a little bit in my way. But we have laminated stuff, this like little infographics, and we've got, there are Caucasian and Asian growth charts for reference. And then that has been the biggest game changer to date with like conversion, in my opinion, is once they see the actual number on a scale, it really hits home with the parent. That's like, okay, well, let's follow your H13. Let's follow this line up to see us. You're at 24.7. Okay, let's go up and up and up. Okay, we're running out of lines. Okay, you're at the 98th percentile or something like that. And, then it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize my kid's vision was that bad, 98th percentile. So that has really helped a lot. Now that kind of helps them get into the myopia management, viewpoint. But then there's a really nice infographic. It's like the I think it's you can look this up. I want to say it's like the International Academy of Myopia, or International Myopia Academy, something like that. There's a really great infographic on there that explains everything, kind of outlines all these different studies. But you can have pretty good results with multifocal soft lenses and atropine and OrthoK. But I'll just tell them straight up, is like, I can't customize these other things. I can only customize atropine so much, like as far as concentration, but without having some negative impact on your kid's vision. I really can't do anything with the soft contact lenses, because they're just mass produced. They're mass manufactured in a certain design. So really, whether you're -2 or -7, like, you're kind of getting the same thing. But OrthoK is different, and I can do a lot there with, again, optic zones, also like asphericity of the optic zones. There's a lot that I can do there that's truly custom for your particular kid's vision. And sometimes we can combine things, but I've also got these big 4K TVs in each of my exam rooms that we put those axle length charts on, and these different things. And it really, I think the biggest way to manage conversions is to do the axle length measurements and go over the chart with the parents. Once they see that, everything kind of falls into place.
That's super helpful. All right, so we have time for one last question, and the question I like to ask at the end, and there's really two pieces here. One piece is, for practicing optometrists out there, do you have one tip or trick? And the second piece is there anything that we can do as a community of optometrists to help you specifically? It's really two questions, but it's sort of give and get.
Tip or trick is a tough one, because it's like there's so many, and also depends on what kind of lens we're talking about. Because there's so many possible answers to that, what I will say is more about your fees. And I don't know if it's a tip or trick per se, but a couple things. One, whatever you're charging is probably not enough. Is probably the overall basic assumption. If we tend to vastly undercharge as opposed to accidentally overcharge. It's almost always we didn't factor in the number of visits or staff time and all these the payments we got to make on that particular instrument, and all factors up together. So I would probably just review fees. On that note, when I think about this, I have to give, I'm sure it's not an original thought, but I give credit to Dr. Mahler, because I just heard him say something. I can't remember if it was in conversation or if it was like at a talk or something at a conference. He made some point, and it was about basically the concept of value. And it's always stuck with me. And I always think about this as far as like, okay, let's say, when you're starting out with like OrthoK or scleral lenses, it's going to take you a while to get good at it. Okay. So if it's going to take you a while, you can expect you to have a lot of visits. So if you have a lot of visits, and maybe it takes you like an hour with the patient instead of, half an hour or something, and you're going to do that multiple times, well, obviously you got to factor in, going back to the fees, saying that that's going to take a lot of your time, and that's money you're not making elsewhere in your staff, and you got to charge more and more and more. Well, then the concept becomes, okay, well, if then you get better at it and you're doing it in like 2 visits or 3 visits, where before it would take 6 or 7, and maybe you're doing it in 1 or 2 lenses where before it would take, 4 or 5, is if you're spending, let's say, a third of the overall time and your cost of goods on the patient is, and then 3 times more when you're starting out, do you charge 3 times more when you're starting out and you're spending all this time and cost of goods? Or do you charge more when you're spending 1/3 the time and the cost of goods? Well, to me, in a somewhat logical way, if you're spending a lot more time on something, it costs a lot more money. And if I'm spending less time on something, it costs less money. And actually, it's literally reversed. It's literally flip-flopped. If I could do something for you in like a fraction of the time, does that create more value or less value? If we're strictly talking about value, not cost, but value. And I always compare it with my staff when this conversation kind of comes up, and I don't really talk about with patients per se, but to some extent, maybe occasionally, I give the analogy, like if I had hired somebody to like build a deck for me, like build a deck in the backyard or something, and I have a quote from one group who was like, we can do it for $2,000, but it's going to take a few visits over the course of like maybe 3 weeks or something. Okay, and somebody else could do it for $4,000, but they could do it in literally like two days. I won't even know that they were there. I won't even know they were there. Okay, well, the $2,000 sounds less, and that sounds good, but now I got the inconvenience of people coming in and out of my backyard for 3 weeks, and the noise, and like I can't enjoy my backyard or whatever. Versus somebody charged me $4,000, they're there in and out in 2 days, and I never even knew they were there. The value is better on that one. It makes more sense. Okay. And that's kind of like the better you get with these specialized contact lenses, you should be charging more to be seen only once or twice. Okay. And the better you get at it, even though you're seeing them for less time and fewer visits, your fees should be going up incrementally as you become a better skilled practitioner and technician. So I don't know if that's really a tip or trick, but it's I think it's a good thing to discuss. I can't remember what your other question was, to be honest, Tom.
What do you want to get from the community?
Oh yeah, I need an associate, dude. So I need a doctor to come help me out. I can't. I'm like the practice is like it's
I might have a doctor for you, actually. So we had somebody that said
if they want to come,
he wanted to move back to Texas. So there's somebody that I can send your way.
Yeah, it's been a journey, kind of trying to find anybody of interest. You would think people would be crawling, scratching the chance to get to Austin, but it hasn't really been like that. And then when people do, it's a lot of them just end up taking these corporate jobs, and it's not, as we already, I'm not going to tell you what you don't already know. It's just not rewarding long term. So yeah, that's a way that you could help me find some interested doctors to come down here to Austin, work in a good, strong private practice, independent private practice with all the equipment you can imagine and more.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank everybody who was with us tonight. Thank Dr. Wolf. You were awesome. Super interesting. I'm going to say 2 things as a non-optometrist. Sometimes when we have optometrists on, I feel like I have to pull teeth to get answers to questions. You were loquacious and eloquent. You did a great job of answering the question that I didn't ask.
That's not how my wife would have described it. She'd say you talk too damn much.
That is not accurate. Yeah. So I want to really thank you, because this was great. For those of you who aren't aware of Peeq, we'd love for you to come check out our website, peeqpro.com, Peeq Pro. Check out the products that we sell and follow us on our socials. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again in a month. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for having me.